All right, so thank you everybody for attending this town hall. My name is Brian Johnson. I am president this year of the Los Altos School District Board of Trustees, and I appreciate you all taking the time to be here. So I just wanted to, and I hope that you all are safe and well and sheltering in place. I just want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do tonight and what the board has in front of us. So Superintendent Baier and his team are going to talk about summer planning and planning for next fall and beyond. And then we'll take your questions. I think probably a good chunk of the time will be Q&A because we want to know what's on your mind and what questions you might have, especially once you've seen where we are with the planning process thus far. I just want to say from the board's perspective, you've probably seen the headlines about the state budget situation. The announcements that came out this week, obviously that's something that we're going to have to factor in terms of planning. We'll talk a little bit about that as well during the presentation about what we see in terms of financial impact. This is the time of year when we as a board pass a budget for next year, which is going to be a little bit even more difficult this year because we don't actually know yet exactly what we're going to have to do when we come back in the fall in terms of safety and preparation and daily cleanings and what. So we're probably going to be less affected by direct state cuts, but the property tax outlook is also a little bit uncertain and everything's provisional without knowing exactly how we're going to have to change our program in the fall. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the planning that we are able to do. And we're hoping that we'll get a little bit more clarity in the next few weeks from the county and the state as far as what the regulations are going to be in the fall. Please feel free, if you ever have questions after tonight, to reach out and email me or all of the Board of Trustees, trustees@lasdschools.org. If you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, we always want to know what's on your mind. And I think that is sort of the introduction. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Baier for a presentation.
All right, thanks, Brian. I will also say good evening and thank you. It's been a long road we've been down together, and we certainly appreciate everything that's gone on the home front to care for your children, our students, and truly appreciate that partnership that we have within the district. I'm gonna take a minute to just walk you through where we are, a little bit about where we've been, where we're headed, and then dig a little deeper into that planning process, and then talk a little bit about finance. So with that, first looking at where we are, you've probably seen this before in the number of emails that have been sent out by the district, either by me or by Sandra McGonigal in the Curriculum and Instruction Office. You'll remember phase one was really the launch, the early launch of that emergency remote teaching, which we're still in. Shortly after spring break, we refined that model. And now we're looking ahead into phase three, which is the 2021 school year, and what lies ahead for us. That is complicated, which we'll get into a bit, but it's something that we have dived into and are eagerly moving forward with limited information we have. Coming up between now and the fall beginning, August 19th, which is when our 2021 school year begins. Beginning in January 1st, we're going to transition into what we're calling Summer Learning for All. And this is an optional program for all families and students to take part in. It's really self-paced, so there isn't a prescribed, rigorous timeline that has to be kept up with. The intent here is really to have it work for all families at the level in which they can take part. It's going to be independent, it's by grade level. We're really focused on math and reading in this, really wanting to make sure that students retain and maintain their progress in both reading and math. We're also going to introduce what what we're calling the 6 C's of creativity, collaboration, communication, and begin to weave those in as well, because we know those are critically important for our students and their future success. And there's also going to be resources for our students who are learning English for the first time, our beginning English speakers who are going to continue to get that support. And we're going to try to create some connections through social media with that. Although it's not mandatory, we're certainly encouraging it. It's not required to move on to the next grade level, but we've had enough parents ask for something to give students the best footing moving ahead into the 2021 school year, that this is what was created. As we look further into that 2021 school year planning, we have initial groups pulled together, teachers, administrators, healthcare, financial angles, and operational staff as well, because we know these are all going to be critical to any of the planning we do for the 2021 school year. We know, as it says there, we have to pay attention to the health and safety of students and staff and families. Paramount is also, and it's included in this idea of health, is student well-being on a social emotional level. Not only do we want them to learn academically, but we need to make sure they stay healthy socially and emotionally. We know that the sheltering in place can be a trying time for many, and we want to make sure we're paying attention to that and providing resources where necessary and where called for. We also know we need to support our teachers and staff to adapt our current program and innovate as we move ahead into the next school year. And as Brian alluded to earlier, we need to make sure that we're financially stable as we move ahead. It is going to be a very difficult budget year next year and into the next several years, and we have to pay attention to that as well. So what we're looking at, just to give you some idea, I know that instruction, teaching and learning is a huge part of this, but there are many areas that we have to pay attention to as a organization. Health and wellness, equity among our students, both the curriculum and the instruction, as well as the people involved. And then we're looking closely at our enrollment as well, looking at how many people might be leaving the area, and also looking at how many people are migrating in, be it from other areas in the state and the country, or from private school. So that's on the kind of the students and instruction side, we're terming it. And then over on the finance and operations side, governance is an important aspect of this. We're a locally elected school board, and how they operate and continue to govern is an important piece of this. We know we have an important topic in facilities planning for the future. And as this stretches, this pandemic situation, we do need to strategize and understand how we're going to continue to move forward on that process. We have our facilities to look at, how any restrictions might impact our facilities, health department restrictions, as well as operations, communications to you as parents and to our broader community continue to be important. Technology becomes more and more critical in this situation. And I mentioned it before, but finance and economic implications on our school budgets are going to play a big factor in our planning. And then also this idea of resurgence of COVID-19. You know, as we do more reading and more studying, it's a fairly widely held belief that there will be a resurgence sometime in the fall or winter. And what is our plan for that? And into that planning process, we're exploring right now multiple scenarios and plans. Sandra will touch on this a little bit more, but we don't know the parameters within which we have to operate right now, right? Those will come down from both the state and the Santa Clara County Public Health Department, but those right now for us are unclear. So we're having to plan through multiple scenarios and understand the pluses and minuses and feasibilities of each of those. Also how to finance those variety of scenarios and whether they can be financed. And then outreach to parents. We'll have a survey coming out to parents this week, as well as our staff this week, asking for both some reflections on the last 8 weeks now, as well as understanding needs as we look ahead into the fall. Both of those are important inputs into our planning process and the beginning of stakeholder engagement. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sandra to talk just a bit about some more detail on that planning.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So as we think about improving what school might look like for the beginning of the year, this idea that we are moving from emergency remote teaching, and I have to tell you that our teachers have done an amazing job in very little time with very targeted training of moving from a really high quality in-class, in-person instructor to doing great work with kids and for kids in a virtual world. But we certainly know it feels for our staff, for our students, for our families right now, like it is an emergency remote situation. And we want to prepare our teachers, we want to prepare our students and our families for what the fall can look like when we are more thoughtfully planned, when we have trained all the different people who have to operate within a system, whether that's a blended system where students are on campus sometimes and also working from home online other times, or whether or not we have to be fully online. So part of that professional development for teachers really focuses in on the design elements. It is different to design instruction for a blended or online platform. It just is. It's very different. There are different engagement strategies that we have to use to make sure that students remain engaged in their learning and active in their learning. Junior high parents out there might relate to that one a little bit, right? We have to use some different strategies. We know we have to offer a more comprehensive education in the fall, whether we're blended or online. Right now in our elementary schools especially, we're really focused on English language arts and math. We have to offer all subjects next year, and we have to be able to support that on our teacher end, but on our student and family end as well. We know we want to be able to offer more synchronous experiences for students, so we need to do some training around what are the best practices if I bring a whole group together online. What are those best practices when I bring a small group of students together online? And how do I do targeted intervention online with students who need it? So those are some of the professional development pieces that we are working on. Let's see. Along with the social emotional piece of it, we want to make sure that our teachers have the strategies to be able to support the social and emotional health of our students from the get-go. And because the beginning of the school year is going to look different than any other year we've ever had. So when we think about the actual scenarios that we've been looking at, we have a terrific think tank of folks from teachers and principals looking at the instructional program lens, and this idea that we are planning for the possibility that all of our campuses will remain closed at the beginning of the year and nobody will be allowed on there. Two, what would it look like if all of our campuses were opened, and every kind of blended or hybrid option in between. We have settled on 8 different scenarios to look at in depth after doing a whole lot of research and sharing some ideas from with different folks around the world, actually, not just even our county, but looking all over the world. And as we look into the scenarios, we're looking at each one thinking about what are the kind of the pluses and deltas of each one? How would this particular scenario work with our special populations of learners? That could be a student with an IEP. It could be a student who's learning English for the first time. We're looking at what are the training needs of teachers and our staff to be able to support this model, whether it's a hybrid or a totally online model. How would we support families within this model and students? What about our specialist programs and our specialist staff who run those programs? And how can we innovate within each of these models? So some of the models you see here are what we're kind of diving into. The grade intensive model is similar to what Denmark and Norway have started with, this idea that if we bring students or are able to bring students back to campus, we start with our primary students, our TK, our kinder, and kind of work our way up, because we know that those primary students have a very difficult time accessing online learning. They require a whole lot of support from their parents or a caregiver or an older sibling at home to be able to access that learning. Within that model, we've also talked about the transition from 6th to 7th grade in our district, and would it be an opportunity to do a little on-campus support for 7th graders who are new to a junior high system to kind of teach them the junior high world. Jeff, I don't know if you want me to go through each one. I can talk briefly about it. Targeted.
Why don't you just do it briefly?
Yeah, targeted curriculum is this idea that students would kind of be maybe on an A-B schedule every other day, coming to school for very specific curriculum, probably English language arts, mathematics, or maybe math and science at the junior high level, more hands-on. And their off days, they would be learning remotely their other subjects. Split curriculum is the idea that families choose. Would you like to join us in 4th grade on campus or 4th grade virtual school? And that would be 2 programs running simultaneously. The block plan is not block intermediate school, but OCK, the idea that students come to school or even online. This could work in either blended or online scenario, but they only have a few subjects at a time. This has been a hot conversation with our junior high folks on our think tank because it's a challenge right now for many of our students to think about managing 7 different courses at a time. So what if they came for 3 or 4 courses for 4 or 5 weeks, they completed a unit, and there's all sorts of talk about the different ways that that could play out. And then the hybrid flex model, perhaps the most controversial out of San Francisco State actually came up with this model. And it's the idea that a teacher is teaching students who show up in their classroom and kind of live streaming the instruction that's happening for students to watch at home. But our conversation today in our think tank group was that we really do design differently for students, whether they're in front of us or at home. And so that had a lot of interesting conversation around it. So we are going deep into all of these different scenarios. I feel confident in saying that not one of them will be the one we end up with, because we like bits and pieces from different ones. And it's easy to see how we can choose the best of the different scenarios and figure out what are the parameters that we'll have to work in or work with to make sure that we actually have something that's doable for us in the fall. I also think—
Sandra, I just add to that, this is Jeff, I would just add to that, fortunately we have some examples around the world of these various approaches being implemented right now. So we're able to learn from Taiwan and from Hong Kong and Singapore and Denmark and Germany.
Yeah, it's been terrific. I also think it's safe to say that it's quite likely that we would have a couple of different models. I don't know that the model that would be best to serve our junior high students would be the same model that would be best to serve our kindergartners. So we're really thinking about making sure that we end up with a model that really works best for the kids we are serving. Next slide there. What we have all agreed upon as a group doing this research is that the need for flexibility is just off the charts. And not only flexibility, but the more and more we talk about it, the more we talk about how our systems need to be in greater alignment, which will actually be able to support that flexibility that we will need, knowing that we might come up with a plan, it might be working beautifully, and then a factor is going to change, whatever that might be, and we have to shift course. And we might need to shift courses multiple times. But I feel great about the work that we're doing and kind of going deep and into the weeds and picking through different pieces, knowing that instruction's only one piece of the pie. We are also looking at that financial piece, that space piece, the human capital, the great folks that we have working with kids, and making sure that in the end, we create a system that will work for us and be agile enough to meet the demands at the time, which is really fun, planning for something that you actually don't know what those parameters will be. So we are looking forward to, when we get closer, getting that community feedback, because we know once kind of we're ready to roll, we've got to roll, and we have to be ready for it.
All right, with that, we're gonna hand off to Randy Kenyon, our Chief Business Official. Randy?
Yes, good evening. Just as it's uncertain when and in what form that we will resume school, it is also very unclear how deep the financial hit that we will take. What we do know, though, is the longer this pandemic lasts, the deeper, the greater that financial impact will be upon us. So specifically, what do we see as the impacts on our district finances? Looking, as this slide shows, we're highly dependent on local revenue sources, much more so than on state and federal funding, unlike many districts throughout the state. As you can see, property taxes are our largest source of funding. They represent 2/3 of our total revenues, and they're dependent on people's ability to pay their tax bills, as well as the assessed value of properties. And that's, of course, linked to employment. Coupled with property taxes are parcel taxes. When you are a property owner, you pay your property tax. You're also paying the special assessment for our parcel taxes. So property tax bills include both the property taxes and our parcel taxes. To be clear, the greatest risk for us with those two local sources, property and parcel taxes, is not this coming year, but it's in the succeeding year, 2021-22. So let me explain. Again, there's two key issues. One related to property taxes. One is the ability of taxpayers to pay, and the other is the assessed value of property. Over this past year, property values in our community have grown over 5%, and the county assessor is confident that they'll have the resources to fully fund that growth for the coming year. But the county assessor and his office is gravely concerned about the succeeding year and people's ability to pay, as well as the assessed values of property. The estimate right now that I am estimating is we could get as much as a 10% hit, so a $4 to $5 million potential revenue loss when we're looking at that year out. With the economy in turmoil, properties are likely to lose value rather than gain value, and that would trigger the county to reassess properties downward, much like they did during the Great Recession not too long ago. And this will in turn drive down our property tax revenues. More immediately, looking at state funding, we're likely to have a hit in this coming year. The governor has made his proposals for the state budget. Included in that are some reductions for all districts, including a community funded district like ours. I'm estimating that the impact could be as much as $1 million in lost funding as early as next year. In the current year that we're in right now, this spring, we've lost some revenue. We have childcare providers who are tenants of ours at all of our elementary school sites, and they have been out of business during the shelter in place. So there's a loss of tenant rental income. The closure of our campuses has meant that our facility users haven't been into our facilities, whether they're youth sports or whatever kind of operations. We are not collecting facility use fees. Coupled with that, we've had some cost increases for cleaning supplies and for distance learning. Also, with the economy in turmoil, our PTA fundraising, our LAF fundraising, their abilities to raise monies are certainly compromised as we look forward. So with all that said, we're looking at potentially probably a $4 to $6 million problem. And in order to mitigate or minimize the impact to our core elements of our program, it's important to take action early rather than to wait. That was the strategy we used during the Great Recession. We took action early and it paid off. That's the strategy we're going to use again this time. So that's kind of a quick overview of what it looks like financially.
Thanks, Randy. All right, as we, last slide before we get into questions, where are we headed next? Those are really around some core items. We're looking to improve and build on the foundation of our virtual school. That's going to have to include professional development of our teachers, as well as feedback from students, from parents, and from teachers that will all be used to build what's next, right? As Sandra said, that's very challenging because we don't yet know the ground rules under which we can play. It is why we're planning for multiple scenarios. And we will continue to evaluate multiple scenarios and vet those possibilities as they appear feasible. Randy talked about financial plan, and we're going to have to develop that as well in conjunction with everything above, and stakeholder engagement such as tonight and what will continue this week and beyond will also be an important piece. So with that, we have about a half hour and we're happy to answer questions. We're going to ask you to use the raise hand function in Zoom to let us know you have a question you'd like to ask. We do have, what do we have? Just over 200 people here. So in your question, please, or in your response, please limit yourself to 2 questions to answer. That way we can keep track and be able to answer the questions. And it'll also give everyone that opportunity to speak. We will put together an FAQ after this. So if you have other questions you'd like to see answered, please feel free to email me. Brian also indicated you can email trustees@lasdschools.org, and we will work to get all of those answered and posted. So with that, let's get to questions. Sarah Stern-Benoit, our communications director, is handling the question, or getting to people who've raised their hands. So Sarah, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I hope that you will forgive me if I do not pronounce your name correctly. I will do my best. And I'll take all of the questions in the order that, or the raised hands in the order that they've been received. So the first person is Sophie Lowenhelm, and I'm gonna turn on your mic. And it looks like you might need to unmute yourself.
You're unmuted, so go ahead.
Yeah, for some reason it is not. Oh, there we go.
All
You're
right.
unmuted now.
Hi. So this is actually not Sophie, but her husband. My question is, so thank you very much for the presentation. I understand that there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this, but I think when you went over the different scenarios, it seemed that you alluded to the fact that the most likely model when the semester starts is either a full online or a type of hybrid model. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on that? Like, what do you see as the kind of the most likely scenario given the information that you have at the moment? Thank you.
Just make sure I'm unmuted. Yes, I would say I don't know that we're ready to say that yet. As we've been looking at the different models, they all have pros and cons. I think there's probably one or two that we're closer to getting rid of, but we haven't actually explored all of our 8 models yet. We anticipate to be done with that by the end of May because we are going deep. But I do think, you know, sure, there could be a scenario where we do have everyone on campus. But the constraints for that, depending on what the guidelines were from the county, would be fairly significant. Sorry, I don't have more detail for you there.
I think I'll just add to it just a little bit. I think critical to state is the obvious, and that is that we know that kids are better off when they're on campus, in front of our teachers, in a classroom, in a typical situation. So we will do the very best to create a best of breed program, but we also realize it is going to be less than most optimal. And so that's what we're working through. We know that childcare is an incredibly important aspect of this. And in order for parents to get back to work, we have to have somewhere for their children to go and be taken care of, and parents have confidence that their kids are safe and tended to, and we realize all of that as well. It is what makes this so incredibly complicated. So just want to make sure that was out there, that knowledge that we recognize that.
All right, next we have Ginny Badras.
Hi there, am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Great, please turn it off. Sorry, my husband has it on his respective computer, so he's running away, so there's no feedback. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm sorry, Randy, I did not catch, we had some disturbances in our background with the 3 kids during the time. I did not catch the shortfall that you were anticipating for this current school year, and also I'm wondering if there has been any forecasting for the coming school year as far as budgetary shortfalls, or where you think we'll stand in the coming school year. And then also when the decisions will be made, if you guys anticipate when we'll be making as far as decisions around what kind of setup the next school year you know, will entail, whether it be the hybrid or, you know, the other 2 setups that you guys mentioned.
So Randy, let me answer her second question first, which is about timeline, and then we can get to the budget. Ginny, that is the question we wrestle with every day. We know we are a bit tied to the guidelines and health orders, which are legal orders that the county health officer will come out with, and they are not want to come out with those too early. But we also realize that we are going to have to put a stake in the ground, probably at a point in time that is ahead of the county health department updating the order for the most recent time. Just as an example, they will probably come up with a health order update at the end of July sometime, right? They're doing this about every 2 weeks, roughly. It wouldn't be surprising if they come up with one on July 31st. We start school on August 19th. We cannot wait until July 31st. Nobody can, parents nor school district, teachers, for that to be the go button. So we are looking at by the middle to end of June, we're probably gonna have to make a call on what the model's going to be. And then, as Sandra described earlier, be nimble enough to flex if the health order or if our plans are somehow in conflict with the health order. But we will have to start planning earlier than we know the final expectations from the health department. Say, Randy?
Yeah, so Ginny, just in summary, I'd say that we're looking at a 10%, you know, a $4 to $6 million, 6 million is more like 10% problem of funding problem over the next couple of years. We've got some potential revenue losses, and just in the current year, I indicated some use fees and some tenant rental income. But we will get hit with some state funding cuts for the coming year, even though we don't have a lot of state money. They intend to give us, impose some cuts to our funding. The big hit is likely to come as we look at the future years with property tax cuts, with assessed values likely declining because of the state of the economy and people's ability to pay related to unemployment rates. So in total, we're looking at $4 to $6 million kind of problem. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, next we have John Keeling.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for running this and accepting my call. I had kids in LASD, and now the youngest is in the high school. I'm wondering what your plan is for appointing a district-wide school safety director. I had put it out there to Mountain View Los Altos High School District that I stepped up and offered to run such do such a job. And I've heard people in LASD also asking about, you know, who's in charge of safety and so on. And as Mr. Baier suggested and explained, there's more than just the pandemic itself. There's mental health issues and facilities issues and so on to deal with. I'm wondering if you are appointing someone from within to handle this overall, or if you're looking to hire somebody.
Yeah, thanks, John. We don't have a specific person assigned that right at this point in time. That would certainly be something I think we would appoint from within, utilizing our, in all likelihood, our health services staff and Director of Student and Staff Services Office.
Okay, and next we have Eunice Lau.
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my question. I know that a questionnaire and survey would be sent out shortly. I was just wondering if there's a possibility of one of the questions being, knowing that most likely there's a good chance that it will be a blended system of sometimes coming to school, some not. If there can be a question to ask the parent about, if for multiple kids in the school system, whether they would prefer a kid, you know, coming to school at different time, which maybe some kid need more attention from whether a parent or a teacher, versus, you know, as myself, I have 3 kids. I would certainly prefer all 3 kids for childcare reasons to be all at school at the same time. Because otherwise you're doing coverage of, I mean, if Nima hasn't go to work, you're talking about coverage all of the days, just like now. As opposed to, okay, I know morning or afternoon or whatever certain days. That was my thought, if that will be in the questionnaire. And to be taken into consideration as you plan your curriculum.
So I'm trying to think, Ms. Lau, if that is at the level of detail for this survey, or if that would make more sense as we roll forward a bit further, because okay. I think we're going to need to know information in some stages,
sure.
And that might not be the most useful at this moment. But we certainly will have some questions about parent need, I'll call it, in this survey, so we can understand what the broad need of our parent community is in a couple different areas.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Atosa Shafa.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to check on actually one of the questions got asked already, which was if we're going to do some sort of survey, and from the parents to see our preferences or our inclination once you come up with the different models. That was my first question. But I think you said it's too soon, right? So that's maybe for later in the summer.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes.
Okay. So that was the quick question. The other quick question, I think you said I can ask 2 quick questions, was I noticed that a lot of the, so I keep hearing from my kiddo, and please don't tell your kiddos that my kiddo said that, that they're kiddos that are hanging out at the school on the fields and all that. And they see it on each other's posts and all that. And I'm not worried about them hanging out, but how do I keep, it's hard for me to then keep telling my kiddos, stay indoors, and don't see your friends. Is there anything you guys can do to make this a little bit less painful so that kids don't see some kids, getting away with it, so to speak, and then they're staying indoors, and some of the parents are being more vigilant about keeping them indoors? I don't know if there's something you can do, because it's getting a little, I know it's almost end of the school year and the summer is going to be free for all, but I'm just thinking in general, maybe also.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. It was actually something we were talking about today. And that's the idea of just sending out some communication again on that topic to parents, especially as we roll into June 1, right? We don't want the schools to be magnets for kids, as it's strange for me to even say that, right? Because we do want the schools to be magnets for kids, but at this point in time, we don't. So we'll send out some additional reminders on that topic. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Sarah Daniels.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sandra. And Brian, if you're still on. Let's see. I had a couple questions. Let's see. What was my first? I was thinking about when you're talking about blended schools, are we thinking about keeping campuses as campuses, or maybe doing grade-wise kind of things? Are you talking about that, or maybe this is too early to ask that? I also wanted to ask for the upper grade math placements, since they didn't have the subject area or the standardized test, how they are going to do that for next year's. So I think those are my main questions. And then I also had a question Randy, when you were talking, you said that during the recession, the district took action early, and that helped to mitigate the issue of a lower budget. And since you guys are anticipating a lower budget, what does taking action early actually mean? All right, thanks guys.
Hi, Sarah. Math placement is actually on the agenda for Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right, Jeff? Not a Monday meeting. Tuesday's meeting because of Memorial Day. So
Tuesday's board meeting, right?
Yes, sorry. So that information will go out in the packet Thursday or Friday. And then we'll be communicating with parents after we talk through it with the board next week. I know that that's a hot topic, and we've been working with our math teachers to find great solutions. I'm not sure completely if I understood your first question, but it sounded like, are we thinking about maybe a school would be an entire grade level? Unless I reinterpreted it, that has not been a part of our conversation, but I might have not understood your question.
No, that was my question, but then I thought that maybe it wasn't appropriate for this level of your planning right now. But I was just wondering if, you know, like you guys are going to have to find some efficiencies in some ways. And I was thinking some of those efficiencies might be more about providing grade-wide instruction and support across the district, not necessarily by school. So I just didn't know if you were talking about that or thinking about that.
We have talked about that more in an online model. If there was a way that we could support teachers with some good instruction, whether that's videos or lessons or additional curriculum to support that, but we haven't thought about rearranging students, but we can certainly chat about that too. And then Randy, I think there was a budget.
Yep.
Part.
I think I'm on. So Sarah, we're just talking about we are going to be looking at potential expenditure reductions for the coming year. We haven't identified anything specifically yet with our board. Part of the problem is there's some unknowns that won't get known until August or September, like property tax revenues and personal income tax revenues, which largely affect the state budget. So some of this will happen a little bit later rather than at the beginning of the fiscal year in July. But anytime we can take an action now, it'll save. So for example, if we were to find $100,000 in expense reductions for the current upcoming year, by year 2, when we start to get hit with likely property tax reductions, that'll be a $200,000 savings because we've had it for 2 years. So the sooner we can take action on things like that, the better.
Great. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay, the next person is Brad Brock.
Hi, yeah, it's actually his wife, Brandy. I just, when the schools open up, I imagine that there will be some number of parents with either high-risk kids or high-risk parents themselves that may not be ready for their kids to go back to school. And I'm wondering, once schools do open up, might there be an option to continue with the online learning and not send your kids back to school?
Yeah, Brandy, I will just say that that's been a conversation within each of the scenarios we've been looking at. Even if we did offer some kind of on-campus something or other, that we know we will likely have families who either choose not to or just can't because of health concerns send their children to that on-campus program. So what would our offerings and options look like for families? So it's definitely something that we're planning for.
And Brandy, I'll just add that it's actually something we're gonna test the sensitivity of that with a survey question as well, just understanding kind of where parents' thinking is, at least at this point in time, recognizing it may change as time goes on.
Okay, the next question is from Mark Millett.
Yeah, hi, my question was, what percentage of the budget would a $4 to $6 million cut be? And would that mostly be headcount, meaning increased class size, or facilities improvements?
So I will start by saying it's not really clear what our financial problem will be yet, right? Again, it's uncertain. It depends on how long the pandemic goes on. It depends on what happens with our economy. It depends on how quickly businesses can get back up and running. So there's a lot of uncertainty still. But the $4 to $6 million numbers that I've been citing represent close to 10% of our total budget. Our total budget's around $65 million, Mark. And it may not all be cuts that we make in expenditures. There may be some way to augment our revenues somehow.
So would that correspond, if it, let's say it was a $3 million cut to actual expenditures, would that lead to larger class size presumably?
Well, if I could just jump in, Randy, this is actually one of the challenges, right? Because normally you would think, yes, that would be a logical path, but we are heading into a time when the public health department restrictions may require exactly the opposite. And so how are we going to square that?
Okay, the next question is from Lauren Hassenhuttel. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
I know you did great, thank you. So thank you, first of all, for having this town hall. It's great to hear from you all, and you put a lot of thinking into this, and I realize that there's a lot of uncertainty, and so I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of myself and my husband, and also our kids. We know that all the teachers are working really hard, as well as the administration. So I just wanted to put that out there as a parent. My second point I wanted to make, I have a 6th grader that's leaving Covington and moving over to Egan. And this is a big jump for 6th graders. And so you had touched a little bit on it earlier in the call. And I just wanted to understand, you know, what's the thinking there? And is there anything that parents can do over the summer proactively to prepare them for this big leap? Thank you.
I know Jeff might want to add something, but I know I've been talking to Ms. Colmore and Mr. Rocha over at Egan, along with our block counterparts. They know with all schools, the beginning of the school year is going to look really interesting, but we want to be especially mindful for students who are making a big transition. We've been talking about what does the introduction to TK and our brand new kindergartners look like into our school system. What about our 6th graders moving to 7th grade? And so we've been talking about not only supporting the social emotional kind of developmental change of being at an elementary school into a junior high campus, but also the executive functioning and the just overall learning skills that are required to be able to access whatever model we come up with in the fall or offer in the fall. So they are working on those pieces. We've talked about, you know, how can their leadership class really support the social emotional and build the Egan community? How can we support out of my office kind of teaching kids some of those executive functioning skills that will be required? It is on part of our planning phase for sure.
Okay, so the next question is from Johnny Chung.
Hello.
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 Basically, I got 2 questions, but one got answered because my kids are more vulnerable because they are like to COVID-19 because they are allergies. So that got answered, and I hope for it. I hope you guys, keep that in mind. That for some kids, have more, you know, are vulnerable to this kind of, you know, like virus, you know, give them option, you know, to stay home. Okay, just keep that in mind, you know. And the second thing is about, I would like to understand more about the IEP. You know, you briefly mentioned about IEP. I would like to know, like, when will you get more information about this, the support for IEP? Like,
yeah, Mr. Chung, we have Jennifer Kiker, our Director of Special Education, is on the call as well. I'm going to have her answer that.
Yeah, so if your student has an IEP, they should be receiving services through their distance learning plan that was sent out to everybody. And we are doing a virtual version of the IEP that happens at school. And so we are encouraging parents to reach out if it's not meeting their students' needs. We know that our students are a very vulnerable population. That being said, that really require that face-to-face interaction to progress oftentimes. And so built into all of these different scenarios Sandra's talking about is our special populations to see how, once we're allowed to come back to school, how can we make sure that we are in a better way to service those students when we can see them face to face.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, sorry, just it's about 8 o'clock. I think if everybody is okay to go a little bit longer, I think we can go maybe about another 15 minutes. So I apologize in advance. We have 12 people with their hands up. We're probably not going to get to all of you, but please do, if we don't get to you, please do send your questions. If you email trustees@lasdschools.org, that'll go to all of the trustees and also to Jeff. And as he said at the beginning, we are compiling a frequently asked questions set. So we will certainly respond to you, and we will try to get all of the questions, all of the answers compiled and put up on the website for everyone. So we can take about another 15 minutes of questions, I think.
Okay, so the next person is Shauban Skagen. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced the name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's okay, it's Siobhan, but it's Martin, her husband. I have two questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So first question, what steps are you taking to eliminate spend, i.e. removing positions or other things you can cut in the budget, just like any other business would do, if there's certain types of classes that's unlikely to be offered because of COVID? I would imagine you would take steps to eliminate such positions or, things that are overhead, whatever they may be. So that's question one. Question two is, I find it extremely disappointing that you are not charging tenants that are renting space. I mean, if you're downtown Los Altos or downtown Mountain View, you're renting a store, you're paying. And so what you're doing is you are saying that the private businesses that are renting on Los Altos School District, they are more important than the students that are attending, which I find peculiar.
Randy, do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, so we do charge rent for all of our child care providers. And my point was they have not been able to conduct their business in school since we've been in shelter in place. So there is the potential for lost revenue from them while they're not in business. So we're actively working on that with each one of those tenants.
And just to elaborate, I mean, we are still collecting rent from the commercial tenants, such as those occupying the tent site that we purchased recently. So,
correct.
And then I think your other question, if I can just take it, Jeff, about cuts. I mean, that's a decision that the board will be looking at over the next series of meetings. We have, as been mentioned, we have a board meeting on the 26th, where we'll get more concrete information about the state decisions and the budget outlook. And then we have meetings on the first 2 Mondays in June, which is normally during the year when we make budget decisions for the following year. So that's roughly the time frame at which we will be starting to consider any changes that might be made to the program.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Joel Meyer.
My question has to do with facilities and the infrastructure in the classrooms. If we are allowed to go back, be it partial or otherwise, how many kids can we successfully have in a classroom if they mandate, say, 6 feet? And if that requires desks and or chairs or whatever else is needed, can we use the bond money for that stuff?
So Randy, I'll let you answer the particulars about the bond, but so right now, Joel, we don't have the number yet, and the number does make a difference, right? If it's 10 or if it's 15 or somewhere in between, understanding how many we can load in a class varies. We can easily do 10 in a class, can probably do 12 in a class, 15 in the class is more difficult in a typical sized classroom. And Randy?
Yeah, technically, bond proceeds could be spent for classroom furnishings. That would have to be a board decision regarding our Measure M funds.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Amy Wang.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you all for being on and hosting this event, and also thank you for getting online so quickly and recognizing that it's emergency mode and looking forward to planning for the upcoming school year. My question are two that are related around the models that you guys are considering. If so, just for context, I've been talking with some of parents who have kids in my kids' classrooms at their grade levels, and there's even within our school a somewhat inconsistent experience around both content delivery and technology. So knowing that there will be perhaps a virtual aspect of school, whether it's partial for the school year or the whole school year, what are your plans and thoughts around making the online learning component more robust and as kind of a platform that allows you to dial up and down depending on the situation and the factors involved with COVID-19 and what happens towards the latter part of this year and into flu season? And so one of the examples is, I know that there's some younger grades using Seesaw when most kids I know are using Google Classroom. So you can imagine if as a parent you have multiple kids at home and you have to deal with more than one system, that's already challenging logistically. So you're not even thinking about the content aspect, right? So that's one aspect of having a unified platform. And then the same goes for content and looking at this opportunity. And I'm so glad to hear, Sandra, you talking about benchmarking and learning from other countries, and maybe seeing this as an opportunity to kind of flip things around a little bit and think about making whole class instruction an online component that can be delivered asynchronously while enriching the in-class time, and that in-class time could be in person or virtual depending on the situation, or whichever model you choose, and that will actually be a more meaningful learning experience for the students and the teacher. So my question is really around what are you doing in terms of unified platform and also looking at content support so that the whole class instruction can be also more consistent in terms of quality level, and then the things that you're doing at the district level to support the teachers so that they can spend their time with the kids.
Yes, everything you said, Amy. Yes, yes, yes. All the conversations we've been having, a lot around aligning our systems, because we have heard from families that it is a challenge when you might have 3 different children at 2 different schools and every teacher is using slightly different tools or systems, and it just becomes more complicated than it needs to be. So we are working on aligning a system so it feels better on the user end for us. And we are also deeply looking at ways that we can support teachers in the delivery of curriculum and instruction in ways where, similar to what you were talking about, right? Like, how do we have those whole group kind of recorded videos, but really prioritize and maximize the time for live interactions between teacher and student, student to student, whole group, small group, all of it. Yeah, you are singing my song there.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Sandin Kandal.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi there, Jeff, Randy, Sandra, everyone else. First and foremost, thank you for your efforts. Greatly appreciated. Two unrelated questions. First, speaking to enrollment, recognizing that you don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but can you speak a little bit more about your gut feeling as to where things are going to shake out, what trends you see? You mentioned kind of competing trends, and it's hard to know what you feel enrollment will look like in the fall versus last year. And the second question is kind of on a logistics thing. I'm just curious to know if you're planning on trying to create a framework, whether it's in person or online or blended, that's going to operate within the constraints of the school day that we had this year, meaning it has the same start time and end time and there's early release, or is that kind of on the table too in terms of going longer into the day? Thanks so much.
So I'll take your crystal balling question, Sandy. Yeah, regarding enrollment, right now it looks pretty flat. You know, in line with what our projections were, but we are going to need to do a second wave of outreach to families, probably late June, early July, to get a better understanding of what the reality is, because people's decisions are being formed right now, and their decision in April may be much different than their decision in June. So right now it looks flat. My gut tells me down a little bit, but we'll keep monitoring and inquiring. Sandra, do you want to answer the other?
Generally, we're thinking about working within the typical calendar and bell schedule constraints, but we're also really thinking about how can we design for flexibility, knowing that families, if we are in a hybrid or online model completely, that families need to have that flexibility. So I think that comes in the part of that kind of independent work and work being available for students, and that we are scheduling that live time between our typical school hours of 8 to 3-ish.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Francesca Fontana. You may need to unmute your mic on your end also, Francesca. There you go.
Hi, this is actually Giulio, her husband. Hi, everyone, and first of all, thanks for the incredible work that you've done. I have two questions. One is about the reopening date. So I've heard August 19th. Is this the date that you are looking for? Because I've heard rumors about opening in June, other rumors about September. So I was wondering if August 19th is still the date. And in the second question is about the second last slide, where there was it was mentioned evaluating VET. I was wondering, what is that all about? Thank you so much.
So in answer to your first question, yes, we anticipate August 19th will be the first day of school for the next school year. Sandra, do you want to talk a bit about just the continuing development here of scenarios?
As we look at all of the different scenarios, it is becoming, I would say, I don't know, more clear that there are some that we just don't really want to entertain. And as we think about the different elements and we bring it back to our health group and our technology group and our facilities group, some of them may not be possible for whatever that reason might be. So we want to narrow down the pool or redesign the pool that we're working within to get closer to something that will work for us and all of our families.
I see. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think, Brian, that takes us almost to your time check. Do you want me to do one more question?
Yeah, I think we can do one last question.
Okay, so Sergey Safinsky.
I'm here.
Great.
Thank you very much for having this town hall meeting. I was late to the meeting and might have missed the part I'm going to ask about, and if so, please let me know. One of our children goes into a special education class at Loyola, and my question is, which is really important to be in the class for a special education kid. Personal teacher's attention is paramount for this kind of children. And my question is, what is going to happen with the individual education plans for 2020, 2021? Any plans, any discussions around this? And if there will be, if you limit the number of days of school days for children or go primarily of online learning, will you be able to find a way to have classes for kids on individual education plans? Thank you very much.
Great.
You want me to
Mrs.
take that?
Safinsky, thank you for the question. I'll again point to Jennifer Kiker, our special education director, to answer those.
Yeah, we're monitoring our students on IEPs very closely. And for some, the distance learning has been great and they've really been able to thrive. And for a larger group, it's very tough for them. It really is tough for families. It's tough for the students, and we know that. So we are monitoring them. And then as soon as we are able safely to bring those populations who are not benefiting from virtual school, as soon as we're able to bring them safely onto a campus, trust me, we will. Like that is our number one goal. So the ones who are struggling and who are not able to access and really do need that face-to-face, as soon as it's safe for everybody, we intend to bring them onto campus again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so thank you everyone. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you, Jeff, Randy, Sandra, Jennifer, Sarah, and everyone else for your questions. If we didn't get to you, I apologize. Please do send Jeff an email or send an email to trustees@lasdschools.org, and we will get those answered. And we are planning to get a frequently asked questions. As I mentioned, just to recap, we do have a board meeting on the 26th. As Sandra mentioned, there will be more information about math placement, various other curriculum issues, and we will also start digging into more specifics about the budget. And then we are going to have board meetings on the first 2 Mondays in June at a minimum to continue that work. And then as Jeff indicated, this situation is probably going to evolve, and we will probably be working as a board and Jeff and his staff as an administration through the summer to flesh out all of these things and figure out what's going to happen in the fall. So please stay tuned. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions or comments. And thank you everyone for attending. And I think that will wrap up this town hall. Thank you.